Welcome back to another episode of the Raiders franchise, and we are back for another off-season as it is time to capitalize on what this Raiders team did this past season, making it to the divisional round and losing to the eventual Super Bowl champions, the Baltimore Ravens. But as we get into things, the retirements see the Raiders lose one of their own. Jimmy Ward retires, but that is not all. We have a bunch of other players like Marcus Peters, Levante David, Xavier Howard, a lot of people departing the league, just like how it is every other season as we go further into the future with quarterbacks like Ryan Tannehill and Matthew Stafford retiring. Now, I don't often show certain things with my players and development traits and everything, but I thought a little bit of a surprising one is Gabe Marietta. He is now a superstar development, which is pretty cool. I thought I'd share that with you. But now let's get into, the bulk of the offseason where we start, as always, with our departures and the Raiders. Big time departure after 7 years. Contract negotiations could not come together between the two sides. Josh Jacobs will not be a Raider next season. He had spent the first 7 years of his career in Oakland, then Las Vegas, but as a running back, now in his late 20s, he wanted a bit of a longer-term contract. We were not willing to give it to him, and with players down the pipeline that we do have to re-sign going forward, especially with an impending potential franchise quarterback contract coming in the coming years, we did not want to commit long-term to a running back who this year was very banged up. I mean, I feel like he got knocked out of so many games. He missed another couple of games. And even at one point, we went, I believe, 6 games without him. And our offense, I mean, the running game obviously was a bit worse, but we didn't really stutter when it came to wins and losses. And our total yardage was about the same. We were able to put the shoulder of the offense more on Deshaun, and he handled it very well. It didn't really feel like Jacobs was as necessary for the success of this team like he was in years previous, so we are comfortable moving on from him. Now, that's really the only huge loss for our Raiders, as we already seen Jimmy Ward retire. We would hope that we would have gotten maybe a year or two more from him. We were pretty happy with what Ward did this season, but unfortunately not. We lose Bilal Nichols, Jonnu Smith, Sebastian Joseph Day, and Taylor Heineke. Not really anything major there, and we did make a trade before the start of free agency, as 6th-round pick and quarterback Aiden O'Connell will be heading to Tennessee for Chig Okonkwo. Tennessee is kind of giving up on Chig Okonkwo, the very athletic, raw tight end who hasn't really panned out, and we are hoping to unlock some of his skills and maybe fill the Jonnu Smith role as that winged athletic tight end as a number 2. We really liked what Jonnu Smith was able to do in certain spots. We hope Okonkwo can kind of fill that role and maybe develop into a potential starter down the line. Aiden O'Connell gets to go to Tennessee, where their quarterback's Trey Lance, so he's going to have an opportunity to compete a little bit at least, and maybe we'll see Aiden O'Connell be a starting quarterback in Tennessee one day. But the Raiders did decide to hold on to a couple of players, and at the bottom we just kind of kept some of the offensive linemen like Thayer Munford and Ted Karras, who was our starting center this past season. We really liked what we got from Tim Settle as a rotational D lineman, so we wanted to hold on to him for another year. John Runyon, a starting guard for us, will be around for another 2 years, as will Pro Bowl level kicker Daniel Carlson, who's been a real staple of our special teams, along with AJ Cole and now Kalen Shanny are in the return game. We want to keep together arguably the best special teams core in the league. And DeAndre Hopkins was banged up this past year. He missed about a third of the season at the start of the year, and in his absence, we've seen Kalen Shanny really step up and become a 1,000-yard receiver, which was a big, pleasant surprise for us. And Jaden Sharu has really emerged as the go-to guy, having over 90 catches this past year. But DeAndre Hopkins, his market wasn't going to be crazy because of his increasing age and the fact that he got injured and didn't have a highly productive year. So it was really in the best interest that he sticks around for another year. He was going to not get really $13 million anywhere else. And we are fine just kind of riding it out with Hopkins being maybe a bit more reliable go-to guy as a third down possession pass catcher. He doesn't need to be all-pro DeAndre Hopkins like we said last year when we brought him in, but even more so this year as we can lean on someone like Kalen Shanny more than we thought, and Jaden Sharu if he continues to grow. I mean, he made the Pro Bowl this past year, and he's really emerged as the number one receiver. We'll see what we do at the running back position, but we could be passing the ball a little bit more next year. So DeAndre Hopkins might see some more action than he got last year, but we are happy to keep him along no matter the circumstances around what a potential run game may look like. Now as we head to free agency in the league around us, yes, Josh Jacobs, it is official, not a Raider next year. He will be going to Pittsburgh, which I think is a very nice fit for him on a 3-year, $38 million deal. He did not want to play under a franchise tag for us, which is understandable because the running back market can be a little difficult. He wanted a longer-term deal. He will be going to Pittsburgh, 3 years, $38 million, and we'll see if we get to run into Josh Jacobs and another jersey at some point in this franchise. But it's not the only big signing, as arguably the greatest tight end in NFL history is out of the AFC West, which is massive news for us. He is heading way across the country to Green Bay to join the Packers on a 2-year, $24 million deal. The Chiefs, a little while back, drafted tight end Keegan Upton out of North Carolina, a player that we covered early on in this franchise, and we thought it was a really interesting draft pick for the Chiefs, who do utilize 2 tight ends. You've seen a lot of Noah Gray over the past couple of years, and I thought it was really interesting that they invested a high pick in a tight end. And you see the plan has now kind of blossomed a bit more, as Keegan Upton will be the number 1 tight end for the Chiefs and potentially be a successor to Travis Kelce. I don't know if he'll be quite the player that he was, but it's great show of confidence in the Chiefs that they were willing to move on from Kelce in favor of the young Keegan Upton. Elsewhere, though, the Seahawks had a really nice free agency as they brought in a couple of, high-level veterans in Darius Slay, DeMarcus Lawrence, and Grady Jarrett, all to 1- and 2-year contracts, as the Seahawks are trying to make a bit of a push in the NFC. They did lose Tyler Lockett, though, to Carolina. DeForest Buckner will be on the move to LA, as will Zadarius Smith, but this time he is going in division to the Chargers, so we will have to deal with Zadarius Smith this upcoming season. But it wasn't a incredibly stacked free agency around the league. A lot of players were able to, stick where they are. A lot of 5th-year options were accepted, but Josh Jacobs and Travis Kelce were the big-time movers. Now, as we take a peek of what the Raiders did in free agency, again, not a crazy amount of action going on. I know a couple of names will stick out. Derrick Henry, this is not the same Derrick Henry that you knew from Tennessee, as Henry is, well into his 30s by this point, and we are not bringing him in to be the workhorse running back on the team, but we wanted to bring in a reliable veteran guy who can kind of just come in and get a couple of short yard situations. We have him and Moss now if we want to, run some very heavy power packages. So it was really just a convenient signing for us, as now we are viewed as contending. A lot of veterans are going to want to come here, along with Shaq Barrett and Tyrann Mathieu. We lost Jimmy Ward. Tyrann Mathieu will step into that slot, and he will get a decent amount of playing time as a third safety for us, but we are now viewed as an enviable destination for some of these old players to potentially chase a ring. So Shaq Barrett, Derrick Henry, Tyrann Mathieu are the 3 players who wanted to chase a ring with us. We lost Sebastian Joseph Day and Bilal Nichols, so we brought in Logan Hall, a piece of Todd Bowles' defense from back in Tampa Bay. Him and Shaq Barrett have connections to Todd Bowles. Thought it made sense to bring them in. So they are going to be, rotating in as edge rushers and D linemen. So, got some connections there. And we had kind of been rotating backup quarterbacks. We brought in Taylor Heineke this past season. We thought we would go with a bit more of a long-term backup quarterback. And we landed on Malik Willis, who is someone who, not many in the league can match the athleticism at the position. As a guy like Deshaun, Malik Willis is one of the few guys who can. So we wanted to have someone who just, don't want to predict anything, just off the off chance that Deshaun does sustain an injury, which the way he plays, he is more susceptible to. We could have someone step in who can run the offense. By this point, Malik Willis has not developed into a starting level quarterback like some may have thought. He's going to be a backup, and I think in terms of landing spots, he landed in the best possible position for him. He's going to be the number 2 quarterback, and we'll see where he may get some playing time if a Deshaun injury ever does occur. But with free agency now officially in the books, we did not have the most eventful free agency, but things will change definitely as the draft is up next, and the Detroit Lions are on the clock to start the draft. So with the first overall pick, the Detroit Lions select Ramsey White, quarterback out of Oklahoma State, and I absolutely love the pick for the Lions. There wasn't a clear-cut top number 1 guy in this draft like there has been in potentially years past with, someone like Raleigh Cordula last year, but the Lions lost Jared Goff in the previous offseason to Tampa Bay. They really fell off hard as they, went all the way down to the number 1 overall pick, and I think they are getting a quarterback who will surpass what Jared Goff was able to do for them. And the last time they were picking number 1 and selected a quarterback, they got a guy by the name of Matthew Stafford, and it worked out, pretty decently in the quarterback room. I can't speak for the rest of the team and how they struggled, but for the quarterback situation, at least, I think the Lions will be set for the next decade, and they can't make the same mistakes they made with Stafford. They have to surround this guy with some real talent, and we'll see if the Lions can find themselves going right back to the top and going to another conference championship one day. At number 2, we have the Indianapolis Colts taking tackle Rashad Bookout from Florida State, and in a very strong offensive lineman class. We talked about Bookout this past season being arguably the best of the bunch, and he tested incredibly. He did not allow a single sack this past season. He helped Florida State get all the way to the college football playoff, and he's going to step in day 1, basically, and be among the most talented tackles in the league. And I can't really say much more other than this is just a phenomenal pick. This is about as slam dunk surefire as it gets in this class when it comes to just making sure you get the best player on the board. And if you are looking to start a rebuild, starting on the offensive line is not a bad idea. And you get a franchise left tackle to help protect Anthony Richardson. It's a great move from the Colts. With the 3rd pick in the draft, the Arizona Cardinals, who once again are finding themselves drafting pretty highly, are selecting the top edge rusher in the class, Jason Weber out of Iowa State. And this is the 3rd straight year that they have gone with defense in the first round, as they have gone with cornerback, and now edge rusher. So they are really trying to build up a great young defense. But unfortunately, so far, it has not netted them a lot of wins. But Iowa State, who has produced a lot of day 2 and day 3 talent in the past 2 draft classes, has yet to produce a really top-end, top-tier player. Jason Weber, though, is the highest drafted Iowa State player in quite some time, as this past season they did put up the Offensive Rookie of the Year in Kyle Bobo, running back for the Bills. We'll see if Jason Weber can be a Defensive Rookie of the Year candidate for the Arizona Cardinals. And with the 4th pick in the NFL draft, the Jets take Blaine Hastings, a tackle out of USC, who now on the right side was the best tackle in all of college football. Him and Bookout made up the 2 tackles on the All-NCAA team. And like I said, in a very strong offensive lineman class, the Jets get something that they have been looking for quite some time, as the offensive line has been quite the struggle in New York, and they have allowed quarterbacks like Zach Wilson and Aaron Rodgers to get absolutely obliterated back there. But I think they've really have gotten their, franchise right tackle. I compared him to Lane Johnson in the regular season when we were doing the scouting, and I think it's a very accurate comparison, as, maybe not quite as athletic and fast as a guy like Lane Johnson, but in terms of a rock-solid right tackle who, is potentially going to be among the guys paid as if he's a left tackle. Not a lot of right tackles get the type of contracts that lefts do, but I think Blaine Hastings can be an exception because he is everything you could want in a right tackle, and in any other draft class, he would be the top tackle. It's just we had a guy like Rashad Bookout, who was number 1, but still a phenomenal pick for the Jets. At number 5, we have national championship winning quarterback Joakim Bradley coming off the board to the Texans. And Bradley is a guy who's really shot up the boards throughout the entire season. Going into this season, he wasn't exactly, perceived as a potential guy who could be taken top 5. But, as he goes all the way to the national championship and wins it, a lot of people will say, well, it was more the run game, and a guy we will get to later on in this first round. And obviously we have seen in the past couple of years how it seems like Texas has an offensive lineman taken in the first round every single year. He's had a lot of support around him, and his numbers, while efficient, do not pop off the charts. He has not, put the team on his back like a guy like Ramsey White has had. But if you're looking for a really sturdy, starting, high-floor quarterback, Joakim Bradley is a guy who's going to give you some stability at the position, and he is not a complete non-factor in the playmaking game. He can move around the pocket a little bit, and he has some good throws and some really incredible throws that pop out at you, but it's only been flashes, it's only been moments. We'll see if the Saints can unlock more from Joakim Bradley and get a franchise quarterback out of him. At number 6, the Chicago Bears take Baylor safety Steve McCutcheon. And McCutcheon, the player who will step in and fill in for Eddie Jackson, who has left the team in recent years, but he put up a whole bunch of stats there in Baylor in a conference that, is always criticized for his lack of defense, has really made a lot of resurgence in the defensive category. Teams like Texas playing good defense. You just seen Jason Weber go number 3. Now McCutcheon here at number 6. He stuffed the stat sheet. 87 tackles, 3 interceptions, 3 forced fumbles, 9 pass breakups. He got in there for a sack and get in the backfield. He could do a little bit of everything, and he is a player who you can move around. You can play him at free safety, strong safety. You can play him in the box. He's just athletic enough to roam around the deep middle of the field. He can do a bit of everything, and he is a player that the Bears are going to be able to use in a lot of different ways. He's a player that I would have loved to have on my team, but obviously, the Raiders don't need a safety right now, but it's a very, very fun player to play around with, and creative defensive minds are going to have a blast figuring out how to line him up all over the field. There was a couple good safeties in this class, as at number 7 we go back-to-back on the safeties, and they take Penn State safety Corey Flanagan, who, unlike a guy like McCutcheon, is maybe not a jack of all trades, but McCutcheon is, while amazing tackler and amazing in the box and everywhere, Flanagan is a guy who is a absolute ball hawk in the middle of a defense, a pure free safety who is incredibly fast sideline to sideline, great cover guy. He can tackle, he can get in the backfield, he can do those things, but that's not where you're using him. He is a strict free safety who is going to roam around the field and make it very hard for teams to get bombs over his head. Now, this Washington team has obviously selected Byron Rohit. They selected Gail Dell last year, and now they go on the defensive side of the football as they are steadily trying to work their way into contention. They went from, I believe, like the number 2 pick, then they're hovering around top 5. Now they're here at 7. It's make or break for this Washington team to try to push themselves into a playoff spot. They have got a lot of young talent, and we have to hope that that talent can be unlocked and utilized properly to get this team into a playoff position. If you're talking about a team that's made a lot of fun draft picks over the couple years that we have been covering these drafts, the Rams should be near the top of that list, as in year 1 they took Clement Trombetta, who I was an absolute huge fan of and led a Clemson defense to a national championship. They take the inexperienced but wildly athletic and high potential tight end Reggie Fletcher here at number 8 from Wake Forest. He is a guy who, you look at the numbers, 74 catches for 1,000 yards and 7 touchdowns, and that alone sounds really nice, but he is a guy who has an endless ceiling and has only been playing the position for a handful of years. And if the Rams, with Sean McVay, want to get real crazy on offense with him, Puka Nacua, and Kyron Williams, it's going to be a really crazy and hard to stop offense if they start lining Reggie Fletcher up, in line, outside, in the slot. A lot of different places you can line him up, and his athleticism is only going to make the offense more dangerous for the Rams. At number 9, we have the New England Patriots on the clock, and as per usual with the Patriots, it is not a crazy flashy pick. It is not the most exciting pick, but it is a very, very reliable, high floor, and even I'd say a high ceiling pick in defensive tackle Tyler Skuggs out of Texas A&M. He is a guy who is an absolute massive human being in the middle of the field who will clog up a lot of run holes, and at 12 tackles for a loss and 6.5 sacks, he is a underrated pass rusher. Even the 6.5 sacks don't really tell the story of how good of a pass rusher he is at his size. Tested very well at the combine, and it really just leapfrogged his draft status all the way into the top 10. About as good of a tackler as you will get on the inside of a defensive line while still being among the strongest and running a decent 40 time. Scuggs is an athletic freak in the middle of the defense, and while having a crazy high ceiling, will also provide day one starting ability in the interior for the Patriots. I think this is about as good of a pick as you could make here, and he is among the best players in this draft class, and it is a very, very nice job from the Patriots to get him at 9. At number 10, this is a very Packer-like pick as they go edge rusher Jarrett Laffey out of Nebraska. Maybe a bit of a reach for a guy like Laffey, who does not present the craziest ceiling among the edge rushers in this draft class, but in years past they have taken a guy like Rashawn Gary and Lucas Van Ness in the first round. They love taking these edge rushers who maybe aren't day one playing ready, but can rotate in early on. In a couple of years, you'll be looking at them and saying, wow, well, they're a Pro Bowl edge rusher, and they're pretty good. They like to take defense in the first round. They like to take their time with these players, and they like to let them develop and rotate in. It's going to be no different with a guy like Jarrett Laffey, who, Rashawn Gary's continuing to get up there in age, could be the potential replacement, as you could be looking at an edge rush duo of a Big Ten Nebraska guy in Jarrett Laffey and an Iowa guy and Lucas Van Ness on each side. Packers are trying to keep that edge rush going for the future of their franchise. Now outside the top 10 as the Cleveland Browns take edge rusher Raytheon Pearson, who is very much a one-trick pony on the edge, as he has all the finesse ability of basically a D tackle, it feels like, but he is a powerful rusher who mixes it with decent strength, decent speed, but they are not drafting him to be a day one player, it looks like, as he is very much a player who is going to have to ride things out behind someone like Myles Garrett and whoever else they may have on the edge and develop behind them before he gets significant playing time. But the Browns, who have multiple first round picks, we will see them later on, are going to try to continue to build this defense while they still have Myles Garrett in the prime years of his career. Number 12, the Seattle Seahawks, who had spent a lot of money investing on that defense in free agency. They go with the offensive side of the football and take guard from Cal, Alec Redmond, who is an all-first-team Pac-12 guard and is exactly what they need to continue to fill out this running game, as he is an incredible puller and incredible on the move, and he's going to help Kenneth Walker out being his lead blocker. Anytime they try to pull, go outside, go counter, go trap, go anything like that, he is going to be a phenomenal pulling guard for them, and they have struggled on the offensive line, especially on that interior, and they have selected guys like Abraham Lucas and Charles Cross to be the tackles of the future. Now they try to build the interior, and they will have a maybe complete offensive line for the first time in a long time. But what would the draft be without a little shakeup, a little excitement, and a massive trade from our Las Vegas Raiders? The Raiders, picking at 26, called up the Texans and want to move up to 13, but it will take 2 third-round picks, a 4th next year, and linebacker Divine Diablo, who had been a very solid player on this defense. But with the emergence of Stanley Camper, we were happy to hand over the keys to the number 1 linebacker job to Camper, let Divine Diablo go to the Texans, where he will be a starter for them. But we have moved up 13 spots. We have also recouped a 4th round pick this year in the trade, pick 109. But who are the Raiders moving up for? It's been a little boring for the Raiders, a little uneventful for them, but they have made a move. And with the 13th pick, the Raiders select Renza Odernaut, the running back out of Texas, the Heisman winner. And the Raiders are putting together an exciting backfield. In the regular season, I talked about Renza and how much I absolutely loved his skill set and how much I compared him to Christian McCaffrey. Now, I don't think he's obviously as good as Christian McCaffrey. He does provide a bit more speed, but less power, and maybe still not as good of a pass catcher as someone like McCaffrey, but in this past season, playing 15 games, obviously because of the national championship. Odernaut put up 2,800 plus yards and 30 touchdowns, and obviously you wonder why a player who's that prolific statistically does not go even higher. Well, that is because he is a running back, and we've seen that hold a lot of players back draft-wise, that teams are very hesitant to take running backs really high. But with our Raiders and how important a running back was to us, did you really think we were going to roll into next season with like a washed-up Derrick Henry or Alex Peralta at running back? No disrespect to those guys, but we had no intentions of stepping down and turning into a just full-on passing attack and putting the offense in the shoulders of a guy like Deshaun, who obviously is great, but he very much goes well with a running back, and a running back who can do even more than Josh Jacobs, as he could, fight to be one of the leading receivers on the team. But the Raiders shake up draft night, and they go with Renza Odernaut, the running back of the future for the Raiders. One of the reasons we wanted to trade up to specifically 13 is we wanted to jump our division rivals, the Denver Broncos. And the Broncos, who are looking to upgrade the offensive side of the football, with no Odernaut on the board, they take spectacular catch extraordinaire Delbert Conroy, who is an absolute highlight reel. His statistics are pretty good as is, but he is an absolute highlight reel. And if you were to just look up the highlights of a Delbert Conroy season or his career at Oregon, you'd swear he was wide receiver 1, and it wouldn't even be all that close. But Conroy's got his own issues with route running and his ability to just play maybe a bit more conventionally, but when it comes to red zone and leaping over defenders and making one-handed catches, there's going to be not many in the league better than him. But we'll see if he can define a more complete game as a wide receiver and really develop as an overall number 1 for the Broncos, who could sorely use that in the absence of guys like Courtland Sutton in these coming years. With the 15th pick, the Tennessee Titans go with East Carolina University edge rusher Dante Meadows, who was a real combine riser, who obviously not the craziest production, as you can see, with 8.5 sacks at the edge rushing position, but he tested very well, was a real surprise, interviewed well, had all those things that you want, played very well in the Senior Bowl. Everything in the offseason process helped shoot this guy from a pretty solidified, solid second-round pick all the way into the first round. The Titans maybe reaching a little bit, but the Titans are, a bit of overachievers, as they have now Aiden O'Connell as a backup quarterback. Obviously, we traded to them, but we're starting Trey Lance and, picked at 15, so this is still very much a team, despite picking at 15, that is in rebuild mode, and they are going with a developmental edge rusher here at number 15. At number 16, we go back to the offensive line, and is another one of the really, really good ones, and it is Auburn guard Raymond Capps. We already seen the top 2 tackles on the All-NCAA team go in the top 10, and now we see Raymond Capps here at number 16, the All-NCAA guard, go, and Capps is about as good as it gets in the interior of the offensive line. Not the first one to go, as we had Alec Redmond go to the Seahawks. I think Capps is actually better than Redmond, and it was more maybe just a preference on the Seahawks side to go with Redmond, but the Giants, I think, get the best guard in this draft class at number 16, which is incredible value in my opinion, and great pick for the Giants. Looking at our division rival at number 17, the LA Chargers go with Malik Kincaid, an edge rusher out of the surprising Stanford team this year. A real stuffer in the run game, as he had 18 tackles for loss. He still provided 7 sacks, on the pass rush game, but he is an edge that is great in the run game, and he is going to maybe help counter a draft pick like Renza Odernaut, who is going to want to attack the outside of the rushing side of things. As we see the Raiders, our game plan, we love that stretch play, we love going outside. We got Josh Jacobs on the edge quite a bit, and Josh Jacobs, who is obviously not a slow running back, but he is not on the level speed wise as a guy like Odernaut, and this could very much be a pick to counter our selection and help stop Odernaut in the run game, as he will pair with Joey Bosa on the other side and create potential new edge rush attack in the absence of Khalil Mack, who they have lost in recent years. Let's speed things up a little bit here as with the next pick, number 18, the Miami Dolphins go linebacker Amos Brockers out of LSU, one of the draft story players we talked about throughout this season, a very solid linebacker who is going right about where he should go, is about where he was mocked to go. Massed over under tackles, got in the backfield a good amount, could get to the quarterback. Once again, another player who could do a little bit of everything. He has a lot more players in college nowadays are coming out with a lot more of a well-rounded game, and he can play a little bit of edge rusher if you need him to. Teams are going to play him more in the middle as a blitzing linebacker. But as we move on to pick number 19, the Jacksonville Jaguars, a team we knocked out in the playoffs and a team we have developed a bit of a rivalry with, go with an interior D lineman, D tackle Dylan Manning out of the national championship winning Texas squad. Maybe got a little bolstered draft status wise due to the team he was on, the players he was surrounded with. Didn't put up bad numbers in Texas, but it is talent wise maybe a bit of a reach. But he did put up 5.5 sacks, 12 tackles for loss, tested pretty decently. But overall, a pretty decent pick at best, I'd say. Let's go to number 20 now, as the San Francisco 49ers, who have been trying to replace Trent Williams since he retired. It's been a difficult job to do, but they are trying once more with tackle Ty Cash out of Michigan, who got banged up throughout this season, only played 10 games, has dealt with some injury troubles in the past, and has really stunted his development. He was a guy who, going into the past season or two, had been thought to be maybe a higher, more sought-after draft pick, but injuries have held him back, and we'll see if he can stay healthy on the 49ers. But as we move on, once again, pick number 21, we have the Carolina Panthers. They are going with San Diego State edge rusher Cordell Burnett, who is another in the run of edge rushers that we have had. This one, though, a little bit different, as his production is off the charts, though. Played in the Mountain West Conference, was among the nation's leaders in sacks, though, at 14.5, and is just a pure pass rusher. You know, pure rusher who rushes with power and power only. And, you know, he put out great production in a small conference. Hopefully the Panthers are seeing that maybe he could translate that to the NFL. Obviously, it's pretty hit or miss with those small school guys, but let's move on to pick number 22. And the Buffalo Bills take in safety Jarvis Mickens III. I absolutely loved his safety class, and if it wasn't for the fact that we had two safeties and we did not need one, and we more were targeting a running back, and also with how high some of these safeties went, I would have been all over some of these guys. And Mickens, who, once again, I'd say would be a number one level safety in a lot of different draft classes, but, you know, he was in the same draft class as a few guys who were, you know, just amazing players. But Mickens is not to be outdone. He was an absolute stat sheet stuffer in some aspects. You know, 100 tackles, has the tackling ability of, you know, McCutcheon, who went really high. Not, you know, quite a ball hawk like Flanagan was, but he can, you know, get his hands on the football. Will not intercept it all that much, only one interception last season, but he is a safety a bit more closer to McCutcheon. He can play in the box, is more maybe of a strong safety type player, but I would say, while not as good of a tackler or not as good in the run game as McCutcheon, definitely a better pass coverage guy, just not nearly on the level of pass coverage guy as someone like Flanagan. Next up now at pick 23, we have Alabama center Tyler Stratton, who was the clear-cut number one center throughout the season until he sustained an injury at about the midway point. He played very well in those 7 games, but, you know, despite the injury, he is still the first center off the board, but he probably lost himself a decent bit of money with the injury. But luckily for him, he is landing in a very great situation, a great fit for a tough Steeler football team who will be looking to run the ball now, and he's going to have Josh Jacobs in the run game to help him out, and it's going to be a very fun Steelers team to watch. Now at number 24, staying on the offensive line, this offensive line heavy class, it is Iowa State tackle George Barber, and this one's a bit of a questionable pick, as Barber was pretty poor in the pass protection game at Iowa State, with a liability at times, but I guess the Falcons really like his run game upside, where he can block for Bijan Robinson, but as a pure pass blocker, he is going to struggle, and we might see him kick into guard at some point in his career. Maybe it would be a better fit for him, but very interesting pick for the Falcons, I would say. Continuing on, we have the Eagles selecting edge rusher Anthony Lauderdale out of Ole Miss, a decent production edge rusher, as the Eagles have really shifted through a lot of edge rushers over the years and continue to just draft them and stockpile them. And we'll see if Anthony Lauderdale, alongside Nolan Smith, can replace what they had once with Hassan Reddick and Josh Sweat and Brandon Graham. But the new future of the edge rush of the Eagles looks like Lauderdale and Nolan Smith going forward, obviously with Jordan Davis and Jalen Carter on the inside, still as dangerous as ever on the D-line. Pick number 26 now. We are going to start seeing a bit more of the running backs get taken, as the best of the rest, according to the Houston Texans, was Javier Bates. And it's very interesting that the Texans, who traded down when they could have drafted Renza Odernot, traded down, let us take him, and they took a running back. So clearly they didn't want to invest that high of capital on a running back, which something I talked about teams not wanting to do. They instead are content trading down to 26 and taking Javier Bates, their favorite of the rest of the backs, and he is more of a pure runner of the football, not much in the receiving game at Mississippi State. But now we go to pick number 27. Once again on the offensive line, it is Kevin Lentz out of Tennessee, the guard, second team All-SEC, started every game for the Volunteers, as he's a well-rounded player who is among the strongest guards in this past draft class. And the Buccaneers trying to shore up that offensive line as they, really took a step forward, as they were picking at the bottom of the draft class the past few years. But they've got Jared Goff and guys like Trey Dutch were able to develop. And this team all the way now at 27 in contention for a Super Bowl run in the NFC. Pick number 28, our division rival Kansas City Chiefs go with South Carolina defensive tackle Raheem Thornton. And Thornton is a guy who's not a lot of production in terms of sacks, but he can get in the backfield a little bit, and he was more so a guy who tested very well, not a guy you will see a lot of action from early on. But these teams picking towards the bottom of the first round are not going with these day one starting players. A lot of the time they're going for these players, maybe insurance plans, depth, guys who can replace someone like a Chris Jones in the future as he continues to get up there in age. But as we move on from the Chiefs to pick number 29, the Minnesota Vikings. It's a really nice pick here, Martin McPeak, and I am surprised that McPeak made it all the way down here at 29. I think he was arguably the one of, if not the best guy available on the board at this point in the draft, as he will stay very close to home. And he was among the league leaders in the nation for tackles at 112, 12 tackles for loss. Another linebacker who was able to just do so much for the Michigan defense, and he is going to fit very well in the Vikings defense, and he is sure to be a day one starter for them. Nice to get that at 29. Pick number 30, though, as we see another running back go off the board. It is Ole Miss running back J.C. Lawton, and now looking to replace Joe Mixon and get Joe Burrow maybe a bit more of a long-term running back. Go for a guy who had over 1,200 yards and 7 touchdowns, but also does give you a little bit of an option in the receiving game, as he caught about 40 balls and 3 touchdowns through the air. And it's going to be nice to see Burrow get a new running back, as Mixon had slowly been declining his play throughout the years. And it's a nice element to add to the offense that already had a bunch of great pieces. Now pick number 31. I said the Cleveland Browns had multiple picks in this first round. It is here at 31, and I think this is one of those players. I said Martin McPeak was among the best players on the board. Here's another one. Bo Howard, a player we did talk about as well. He, slid down in the draft a bit because he didn't run a fast 40 time, ran in the 4.5s. It really hurt his draft stock a good bit, but he is among the best man-to-man corners in this draft class, and he will get his hands on the football. 12 pass breakups in this past season. I think the speed is not going to be that big of a factor. Good pick. And now at pick 32 for the Ravens. This one's a bit of a head scratcher, and teams who pick this far down have a little bit of a championship arrogance with their draft picks, and I think this is a case of that. Jalen Bonner out of LSU. I said another LSU player would go, and it's not the one I thought it would be, but Bonner, who is a complete just question mark at the receiving position. Not a great route runner, just a decent athlete and get the ball in his hands, but a bit of a questionable pick here, as he was not slated to go anywhere near this high. But the Ravens, Super Bowl winner, so they probably don't care. And as we wrap up the final notable picks in the draft, we kind of give you the best of the rest, players who were draft stories that didn't get in the first round, and our other picks. We have Oklahoma running back Bill Culliver, a running back who I would have thought with some of the guys who went in the first round, I thought he would have went in the first round, but the Saints now, they go with Texas quarterback Joakim Bradley, Oklahoma running back Bill Culliver, so they now have a quarterback running back duo for the future, along with Chris Olave at wide receiver. It's going to be a pretty exciting offense for Saints fans and maybe non-Saints fans to watch in the coming years, but I think it's a really nice pick to get him with the 8th pick of the second round. We move on to the 10th pick of the second round, and a guy I really like, it is linebacker Michael Poe, Mr. Jack of all trades here. When I talk about other linebackers being more stat sheet stuffers, this one was the one with 91 tackles, 8 for a loss, 6.5 sacks. You can line him up at the edge. You can line him up anywhere, really. He could be 4-3 edge, 3-4 edge, 4-3 inside, 3-4 inside. Like, he can play in any scheme, anywhere, anytime, and he can be productive anywhere, and he's going to go to the Rams. Another player the Rams get that I liked a lot. And at pick 23 now, we skip ahead, and this one's a really interesting one. The Steelers go at running back Travell Harris out of Notre Dame. Now, they did just sign Josh Jacobs. So, and not only that, they signed Josh Jacobs to a 3-year deal, and Travell Harris was another running back with some of the running backs that went in the first round. I would have thought he would have went in the first round. He didn't. They draft a center in the first round. They go running back in round 2, and the Steelers now have a 1-2 punch of Travell Harris and Josh Jacobs. And Harris was a player that I likened a little bit to Jacobs, and it's going to be really interesting to see how that works out, but the Steelers are going to have a really fun run game going forward. Now, a couple picks later, we pick at pick 26, and the Raiders in the second round, they go with center Nate Larson out of Missouri. Now, with Ted Karras getting up there in age, and we kind of strung him along for another 1 year to kind of be, arguably the center for this season, but Nate Larson will challenge for the job, of course, and I think this is a really decent pick to give us a potential option for the future at center, as we really have, our guard situation with Runyon solidified for another 2 years, and, Leo Wilcox. We have, Colton Miller for the future, and he'll be pretty solidified there. But center and right tackle are the positions that are pretty up in the air, with Garrett Bowles up there in age and Ted Karras up there in age. We hope that Nate Larson will be a center we can lean on in the coming years, and we won't have to deal with that, and we'll just have to focus on right tackle. But Nate Larson is our second round pick. We do not have a third round pick. The only third round pick we will be talking about is a really surprising fall, and that is Dwayne Wooten, who is a Heisman candidate receiver who had over 110 catches for 1,500 yards and 12 touchdowns. Now, why he fell in the draft, I have no clue. But the Packers just got themselves a wide receiver who is capable of going in the first round. They just got him early in round 3, and I think that is an incredible pick for them. Some guys just fall and you don't know why. This one is the one where I'm like, I don't know how he didn't go higher. Packers get an absolute steal, and he could challenge to be a top receiver for them. Now, the last pick we will be talking about, we skip all the way to round 4, a round 4 pick. It is Trenton Power, quarterback out of Georgia. He came second in the Heisman. So yes, we got number 1 and number 2 in the Heisman, but Trenton Power, a bit deceiving as a Heisman candidate, as he is not an NFL quarterback. He does not translate as an NFL quarterback. He is basically just a quarterback of convenience for Georgia, who didn't have really anyone else to play, and they just utilized his running ability. He ran for 1,800 yards and 24 touchdowns in a, if you remember Jordan Lynch from Northern Illinois, maybe more conventionally, maybe like Tim Tebow at Florida. He's more in that mold of quarterbacks. He can't throw the ball very well, but took him as a for-fun player, utility player, a guy who can line up wildcat. He could play tight end, could play running back, could play wide receiver. We don't know where we're going to play him, but we should have some fun with him, I hope. So that will do it for the off-season and the draft. As with our 5th and 6th round pick, we just took backup linemen. We didn't have a 7th round pick. Nothing really to report on there. But for the Raiders, it wasn't a whole lot of massive pickups for us. We made the big trade up in round 1 to get Renza Odernon, but a lot of this was keeping the young core together, finding a replacement for Josh Jacobs. And I think we did everything we had intended to this offseason, and we more so look towards next season. We're in year 4. We come in to the NFL season with expectations to be great, and we are starting it Sunday Night Football off the bat. We'll be taking on the Kansas City Chiefs in about as big of a way to open the season as you can on the road, and we'll see if this Raiders team is for real. It's going to be the Raiders and the Chiefs in prime time to open year 4. Next episode, I hope you're all excited for it. I will see you all in the next one.